symptoms of overpopulation for you to deal with. We're not cannon fodder for your wars! We will fight for our freedom because we know what freedom feels like. And this is not it! This is not it!
People think they're free, but they're not. We've been given the illusion of freedom, the illusion of choice. That's the genius of these rulers, that they've created this society that's conditioned to deny what's right in front of its eyes.
Which is what?
That we're slaves.
Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. I am so infernally happy you have manifested at AM by Gnostic Radio, broadcast at the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where East meets West, always through the God above God that can. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. In fact, you are the final authority, oh you truth seeker warriors and spiritual entrepreneurs. It's all about you and remembering how beautiful you were before they made you forget. And how free you were, how imaginative you were, and getting it all back through total recall, and with the most useful, empathic, and powerful spiritual and psychic tech for this reality that is one big-ass fake news, alternative fact, and Mandela effect. You can call this spiritual and psychic tech gnosis, and it's all about you accessing it.
By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe.
Carl Jung expressed this show's ethos and my attitude better when he said in his Red Book, "Believe me, it is no teaching and no instruction that I give you. On what basis should I presume to teach you? I give you news of the way of this man, but not of your own way. My path is not your path, therefore I cannot teach you. The way is within us, but not in gods, nor in teachings, nor in laws. Within us is the way, the truth, and the life. Woe betide those who live by way of examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life if not yourself? So live yourselves."
If we have souls, they are made of the love we share, undimmed by time, unbound by death.
We are certainly becoming alive in so many ways here at the virtual Alexandria. The Gnostics, history's first depth psychologists, contended that the whole of creation was suffering from a past trauma and continued gaslighting from hating angels. And each one of us had to voyage to our past and the past of mad gods to find out what went wrong, understand it, heal it. As April DeConnick writes in The Gnostic New Age, the tragedy wasn't that the alien god became fragmented in his process of awareness and self-knowledge. No, the tragedy was how inevitable this was.
In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move.
We're turning back the tragedy by knowing ourselves and becoming aware of the trauma of this existence. It's not an easy path because we must go inward to so many cataclysms and war zones as we move outwards to understand the bad software that makes up most of the universe. As the Gospel of Thomas number 67 states, Jesus said, "He who knows the all but has failed to know himself has failed completely." And as Peter Gabriel said in The Carpet Crawlers, you gotta get in to get out. Let us continue knowing ourselves in the all, and as your host, sometimes known in his simian form as Miguel Connor, I am with you every step of the way. You won't get us, Jehovah, and your carpet crawlers.
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
On this April, the year of our Demiurge 2017, we continue knowing ourselves and the all by doing things a little different, tweaking to continue expanding this Red Pill cafeteria. My assistant producer and friend, Van Sachi, oh you servant of Aletheia, will be my wingman, a mini Abraxas if you would. Very exciting. And we are honored to have back as our astral guest Scott Smith, author of God Reconsidered. Our topic will be understanding the Archons and the origins of evil. But in our pluralic threesome, we cover aeons of thought-provoking, consciousness-expanding territory that includes reincarnation, parallel universes, the spirit world, death, the nature of the alien god or undocumented deity, to be politically correct, and so much more, all through the Gnostic lens.
Hell, I'm gonna grant your greatest wish. I'm gonna show you a world without sin.
And speaking of doing things differently to grow this Red Pill cafeteria, this and most shows are now found in their entirety at our archive of past shows. In other words, the first half of this interview is available on our podcast and YouTube channels, while members get the full dope. To join our archive of past shows and get this and other full interviews, as well as other bonus content, and to access our entire catalog, please go to thegodabovegod.com and subscribe for a mere $5.99 a lunar cycle. Please let me know if you have any feedback or suggestions, certainly about having Vans as my Krishna charioteer and other changes, by contacting me through, you got it, thegodabovegod.com. I've been doing the shtick for a while, and maybe you want me to do some other shtick. I can't do this without you, in both support and sage advice.
It's like God's vagina.
Let me know, and please keep supporting in any way you can. A few shekels here and there, via PayPal or Patreon, where higher level members also get access to the archive of past shows and this entire interview. You can also go to our Amazon wishlist at, thegodabovegod.com, or support through our Amazon affiliate program. Buy any of the books listed there and through there, and I get a kickback. For example, clicking the graphic or link to, other voices of Gnosticism at the homepage. Even if you don't buy the books and then buy something else, taking the book out of your cart, I still get a kickback. Consider the godabovegod.com as your Amazon portal. All methods of support are found at, thegodabovegod.com, or just contact me.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Much appreciation and Lilith's kisses to those of you who support this eternal soundtrack of the counterculture on a weekly basis. We're doing so many wonders together, and the gods and their butt slaves in the establishment are getting scared. They're becoming as irrelevant as Dane Cook's career, as ridiculous as Harrison Ford flying a plane. We shall continue disarming all the Archons in your life in our interview with Scott Smith and in the future.
We are the Walking Dead.
We will know ourselves, and we will know the all. Write your own gospel, live your own myth. Oh, wait. First, another change, and that is our new sponsor, the Vatican. And here is their commercial by, I don't know, some young pope. Here we go.
And remember what St. Augustine said. If you want to see God, you have the means to do it. God is love. I, on the other hand, won't speak to you about God until there's peace. Because God is peace. And peace is God. Give me peace, and I'll give you God. You know how wonderful peace is. You have no idea of how disconcerting peace can be. But I know.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by Scott Smith, author of God Reconsidered. Always good having Scott back. And as mentioned in the introduction, we're doing things a little bit different. This show in its entirety will be found at our member section as we try to grow and expand this show and have things evolve for the future for the listener. So we also have the great pleasure of having my assistant producer and often wingman on many projects, Vance Sachi. How you doing today, Scott? And how you doing today, Vance?
Well, I'm here in spirit.
Well, that's nice.
And I'm here flapping away.
There you go. I hope things are well under the oppressive yoke of the Archons. So, and that's how I wanted to start this interview, Scott. In other shows, you've discussed your spiritual experience on your show of talking to the spirits and Gnosticism in the 21st century and so forth. You had a moment of gnosis in your life, and things sort of opened up to the reality of the world. But something we really haven't touched on, or maybe we should expand tonight, is the idea of the Archons. And that's a question I get a lot, and I mean a lot. And it's a simple question, Scott. Are the Archons real? Are they more than in our head, than in an archetype, than alien invaders? What say you?
I am a firm believer in the power of evil. And therefore, the Archons are at least as real as the aeonic powers or the divine powers. I would think for those of you who have studied world history, which happens to be my journalistic specialty, it's pretty clear that however you define evil and the Archons, this world is the best possible world in the universe for evil to thrive, broadly defined. So in terms of the general idea of what the Archons symbolize, certainly this is a dualistic universe. I would go so far as to say Manichaean, maybe even Zoroastrian universe, where the powers of evil are probably equal to the divine powers. And I think that the reason this is not generally recognized is because of some really complicated factors of human psychology. I just posted on my website, godreconsidered.com, my third Huffington Post blog on Gnosticism, which incidentally, they only allowed me to do when they decided to do a beta where they didn't censor and edit everything. Those who have been longtime bloggers on other topics, and I'm a travel blogger for them, were suddenly allowed to kind of edit our own stuff. So I sneaked the Gnostic Trojan horse in, and I've been posting the first three blogs on my website. And in this third one, I go into the details as to why human beings are so optimistic in the face of so much evil and suffering. And this explains why traditional religions are able to get away with the completely crazy idea that a benevolent God created this world. He is, however, even though he created us, not responsible for mental and physical diseases or earthquakes and tsunamis, or the fact that any number of clearly crazy superstitions are allowed to take over the world, and that this is a world of great suffering. So how do people embrace these religions? A combination of the archons appearing to be either the Virgin Mary or angels of any sort, revealing scriptures, false religions. They have very impressive powers of magic and are able to dazzle people going back to probably the Old Testament days, whether you define the demiurge as the head archon or some kind of sub-divinity. And so this is the world of the archons for sure.
Scott, I got a question for you.
Yeah, I figured you would, Vance, because I know you are more of the non-dualist Gnosticism. So yeah, my next question is, Vance, I know you have a question.
Well, I'm a non-dualistic. I'm a non-dualistic dualist. So, yeah, I think there's both dualism and non-dualism all together. But that's dualism. But anyway, Scott, how can we tell if our revelations and mystical things are from actually not just the archons fooling us, or if it's the real archon or the aeons from the pleroma, assuming, let's say, good aeons?
Well, one of the things I tried to do in God Reconsidered is to kind of use Occam's razor, the philosophic principle of the simplest explanation is the likely one to be true that accounts for all the different elements. And, we can go back to Descartes and say, well, we don't really know anything except that, each individual is thinking and so forth. But I take a more pragmatic approach, which comes out of the fact that I have, as many of your listeners may recall, a very mundane journalism career. My job is to interview famous CEOs and find out, what lessons they learned in the business world that would help others succeed. And so I've got this kind of day job where I think in really practical terms, and I think that with journalistic training, one can kind of take a common sense approach to some of these metaphysical questions. So I don't think that we have to worry about having all the answers or, our thoughts being controlled by evil entities or anything like that. From my point of view, my argument in the book is that we can start getting at whatever the great truth is by eliminating the obvious things that are not true. And one of the things I did that is not popular is to show why Hinduism and Buddhism are not really good alternatives as compared with, let's say, Gnostic Christianity. So bringing it to the point here about how we can tell whether we're being deceived or not, let's say, by, is the Virgin Mary who is appearing to the 40,000 people at Fatima, is this the real Virgin Mary? Or isn't there something suspicious about the fact that there's this little silver disc next to her during the some of the visions? And incidentally, there's a great book on that kind of stuff called Miracles by my favorite parapsychologist, the late Scott Rogo, who kind of launched my career studying the supernatural. And I do think that that Gnosticism is uniquely positioned to essentially call a cosmic spade a spade and say, okay, all you religions, and I include East and West, who claim that there is a divine destiny for us, there is a really, really good reason why we have been placed here on Earth. And the Gnostics say, wait a minute, didn't you guys read the Old Testament? Or in the East, you guys claim that you're here to incarnate and progress, and yet you keep coming back as, a baby that's going to die in Africa, 10,000 years ago, or whatever the situation is. And so I think that the Gnostics stand back and say, well, it's all bullshit and propaganda when it comes to the traditional religions of every kind. So back to your question about kind of how do we discern, are these angelic or aeonic powers, or are these the great deceivers, the archons and stuff? One of the things I would say is this. The reason I think that it is a dualistic universe down here on Earth, maybe not when you get up to the true God or other universes or something like that, but this reality does have a lot of supernatural manifestations. So we can't say, like the fake skeptics do of the Skeptic Society and the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, that there is no invisible dimension or paranormal. There are supernatural powers, and once we admit that, then we can say, well, the fact is Jehovah from or Jesus from the book of Revelation is not coming back with that apocalyptic end of the world. And so it appears that the devil or the demiurge or whatever the archonic forces are, they don't have complete control of this reality. And at the same time, the Marian visions, or Joseph Smith and the angel Gabriel, the angel Moroni, or the angel Gabriel in the Arabic world, or whatever our favorite god is, Vishnu or whatever, the good forces also have not overrun this reality. This reality seems to argue in the 21st century, where many things are going pretty well compared with the last 100,000 years, that there is a dualistic tension between the forces of good and evil. And in fact, it doesn't appear that it is easy for these spirits from other dimensions to intervene in our reality very often.
Yeah, that makes sense, Scott. I mean, but I guess the question is, and then maybe after Vance, after this question, maybe Vance can jump in and give us his views of the emanations and the aeons and how the archons work. But I want to know, some might say, well, this world seems pretty archonic, by as above, so below. The state of this world just gets weirder and weirder. I know it's hard to do good. I find it's a lot harder for me sometimes to do good, because I just want to, as a human, I just want to take the shortcut, be bureaucratic, be archonic, just be, a complete Hylic human being. So the question is, why doesn't the good God, intervene in our lives if this is some sort of equal, half black, half light kind of world?
Well, I would say that those of us who have been involved in spiritual work, we do experience miracles. I noticed when I do more meditation, I do have lots of synchronistic experiences to the point of truly bizarre stuff that I believe is the good God or the aeonic powers reaching into this reality. I could literally write a book on this, and I didn't get into a lot of this stuff, but I'll give you just an off-the-wall example. When I was quite young, as some of your listeners will remember, I grew up Mormon. The Mormons have an extremely active supernatural life. It's a living religion. And my wife, who some of your listeners may recall is a practicing pagan witch who is very sympathetic to the Gnostics. She's a good friend of Stefan Heller and just shared the podium with him at Halloween talking about witchcraft and stuff, as a matter of fact. And she's had a lot of supernatural experiences. And she went to, and she's so psychic. She's had a couple of near-death experiences. And she's so psychic that she can go up to a stranger on the street and touch them and tell them where they're stuck in their lives. Now, she's very sensitive, and she went to the funerals of both my mother and father, and she came away weeping because she said the power of the Spirit of God was so powerful there. And she and I have had a lot of truly astounding experiences. We feel like we have a lot of miracles that happen around our travels, because about once a year, we try to get to some destination which often has to do with history, which we think Americans need to learn more of, world history especially, or some spiritual thing, like we've been to India, we've been to Delphi, Cairo, a lot of different places, seen the whirling dervishes many times, and we often had these weird synchronistic experiences where we'll meet up with people that, you know, no logic could make happen, really. And so I think that the example I was going to give you from my Mormon days, and Mormons do have a lot of really amazing things happen, and probably your listeners are familiar with Harold Bloom and Stefan Heller, who both basically said that, you know, Joseph Smith was one of the very few prophets in history who could make other people see as visions, and all the angels who appeared at the dedication of the Kirtland Temple. So I grew up in that milieu, and I did not see angels myself, but many of my closest friends did have encounters with what they said were angels who seemed to bring them help. But I'll just give you this one last thing that I started out to talk about, which was at the time when I was really active in the church in my early 30s, and I was speaking at the Sunstone Symposium about every year, where Stefan Heller and Dr. Lance Owens have spoken on Gnosticism, and so have I now. But back then I was talking on a variety of topics and researching world religions and the relationship to Mormonism. And every so often, I would go down to the Krishna Temple in Los Angeles. And I knew these people very well because I had started one of the predecessors to Vegetarian Times called Vegetarian World. And I sold it to Vegetarian World in 1978. So I had a lot of involvement with the Krishnas. I'm quoted on the back of their cookbook and so forth. And I went down to one of their regular little feasts, and by a synchronistic event, out of the hundreds and hundreds of people there, I happened to sit next to the guy who is only there about 2 days a year, he told me. And I was talking, he was the Krishna representative to colleges where they would go and talk to religion teachers and stuff. And I said, so where have you been recently? He says, well, I just came back from Brigham Young University, my alma mater of sorts. And he said, I talked to Hugh Nibley, who was a famous Mormon scholar, somebody that I knew very well. And at the time, I was very involved in kind of defending Mormonism from all the fanatical, the fundamentalist Christians who hate Mormons as much as they do Gnostics. And he said, Hugh Nibley told me when we were talking to him about Krishna, and we said, Krishna lives on a planet in this other dimension, and he's blue. And that's not exactly Mormon orthodoxy, but Nibley said, you know something, maybe we got it wrong. That's a possibility where, you might have some truth there we don't have. And the early Mormon prophets were all very good about acknowledging truth in other religions. But the chances of my sitting next to this guy who just came back from there and knew the very guy I did, and then I find out, what he said, these kind of odd synchronicities, what I call mini miracles, occur constantly in my life and Sandra's life. And I think that the more people get involved in going to a mass or doing meditation and other spiritual practices, and of course the ancient Gnostics did a lot of this stuff, the more these things are likely to be generated. But it appears that there is a great deal of difficulty for spirit entities to influence this dimension. And I would argue that the true God is probably quite removed from this material world, and perhaps God is more of maybe a being, but maybe something of a metaphor when it comes to prayer and how prayers are answered. And it could be that perhaps the material world is like a radiation or a Ebola zone or something for spirits, where there is a kind of like a physical danger aspect why there isn't more interaction, because we know there are spirits, good and bad, or so they claim, but neither one, nobody is appearing over the White House calling the media there and overshadowing Trump for an hour with a divine message, And you would think that if you were an Aeon or an Archon, that, you would want to kind of get your message out, but apparently they can't.
All right, Vance, what about you? Tell us your views on the dualism and the demiurge, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I have to confess, I'm a flat-out mystic, and I'm a Gnostic. I was a mystic first when I was 17. And then, as you know, Miguel, it's a long story, but the bottom line is I spent many years trying to figure out what it means for all of us being one. And the original message was that really there was only one consciousness that exists, only one. So all these things that we've been talking about so far, the Archons, the Aeons, and so forth and so on, the way I see them and the way it was told to me is that they are all like facets of one individual thing, like a laser beam going through a crystal and shining something on the wall. And then you put another angle, it shines another wall. If you did that fast enough, it looked like there are many, many things running around the universe, like a hologram. And that's the way I see it. So they're separate entities, and we can interact with them as separate entities, just the way I'm interacting with you and Scott. But really, in a very fundamental sense, they're all part of the same source. It's kind of a way of seeing both aspects at once, and it's a vision in my mind, but it's hard to say, So that's basically the way I see it. And I scratched my head, though, about the Archons. And here's one question maybe Scott would like to address, or Miguel, if you feel like chiming in, I'd love to hear your take on this too, which is two possibilities, at least. The Archons, they set the world up in a certain way with a bunch of rules and so forth. And they sat back and they watched it run. And all the evil is doing to the horrible rules that people get trapped into because we can't get out of the rules. You got to play the game. Or are the Archons constantly lurking around and popping through like Agent Smith, like a guy will be walking down the street and all of a sudden the Archon comes through him and he like clubs you on the head. That's something I wonder.
Let Scott feel this one. I'm sure he's got plenty of comments, maybe even a question back. I know, I think, I should have said, I think the proof for Scott for Aeons is, never mind. I was going to say a joke, but it's not worth it. It's probably too late for this joke. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm willing to listen to your joke and then rebut it.
No, say the proof if I know your answer, the proof if you're being influenced by the Aeons is that you voted for Hillary. But that was a couple of questions back, so
I'm glad you said that, Miguel.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Takes a village, takes a universe.
Yeah, I've told Vance, I recently forwarded to Vance a very interesting paper by the novelist Nick Sambrook, which argues kind of like Philip K. Dick for what I would call scientific mysticism, that, all things are one, that our reality is a projection of the collective unconscious and so forth, or I think he might call it the collective subconscious and so forth. And I really think that Vance and he would make a fascinating interview. I'd like to listen to it. However, there in my second Huffington Post blog, which is in the Facebook forum on Reconsidered.com, I went into quite a bit of detail as to why I don't buy the idea that everything is essentially one. And we shouldn't devote a whole lot of time to this because this would make a whole show unto itself. But I go through and I quote what I call the New Age physicists like David Bohm, Friedhof Capra, and Gary Zukov, and a lot of these guys. And, they make their case, and lest anybody thinks they're talking symbolically when they say this, material reality is not real. I've got some quotes in there where they make it extremely clear. And what they're basically saying is that the new quantum physics, specifically the double slit experiment that apparently shows that the viewer is influencing the outcome, what's called non-local behavior, where one particle seems to be part of a particle that's a distant illusion, and so forth and so on. In The Grand Illusion by Brendan Murphy, which it was kind of the reason I wrote this, he basically says, Yogananda and some of the other mystics that came between the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, they told everybody everything is an illusion. The material universe is an illusion, or at best, everybody is seeing different parts of the world. And first of all, if you talk to physicists and study what they have to say on this, they do not agree with that. I mean, these experiments they're talking about, as one physicist wrote, there are hundreds of theories to try to accommodate these things, and we should not jump to conclusions like, let's throw away the material universe, it doesn't exist, everything is one, and it's really, the mind of Brahman, just because we haven't figured everything out. I mean, we haven't figured out exactly how to live in a universe where both Newtonian physics applies at the macro level and quantum physics at the invisible level. And what I say is, anybody who says that the material world is really an illusion is making the same mistakes that the physicists did at the end of the 19th century, where they said, something, we've got it all figured out, we just have to find the proof for ether. And a certain amount of, at least Smolin, who's a really well-regarded Canadian physicist, he's been called the new Einstein. He says you have to stay within a certain amount of common sense and not leap to wild conclusions because they happen to fit your preconceived philosophy. I've mentioned this before on your show. I've studied Hinduism very, very closely, been to India, and of course I'm very close to the Krishnas and stuff. A lot of people don't understand that when Yogananda and Vivekananda came to the U.S., they were some of the first gurus, and they perpetuated Shankara's version of Advaita Vedanta, which is the classic kind of extremist form of Hinduism that says there is only Brahman. We individuals are just an illusion of Brahman. We're Brahman's dream, essentially. And it is to be literally taken that way. But what people don't realize is this is not at all mainstream Hinduism. Even the Advaita Vedanta gurus, by and large, disagreed with Shankara and said, no, there are individual jivas or spirits. And, it's not all one thing. In fact, the mainstream yogis in India will tell you, something, that notion, that feeling of mystical union with the one that Shankara's people talk about, that's just a temporary way station. You can get beyond that to other realms. And besides that, once somebody comes out of their mystical state, they're still whoever that individual is. They are no longer Brahman, It's just a temporary feeling. So the bottom line is, if people really want to get into some of the nitty-gritty of this, look at my second Huffington Post blog right near the top of the Facebook forum at godreconsidered.com. And I don't want to kind of drill into that, but I do believe that it is certainly within the Gnostic tradition to treat the material universe as either an illusion or, a temporary, unimportant manifestation. I mean, Gnostics have very few dogmas, so it could be that, or it could be kind of the Manichaean extreme, which says, the evil power is as strong or almost as strong as the divine power. So we have lots of room for heresy and no excommunication last time I checked.
Yeah, so far so good. I would definitely, for the listener, if you hear something in the background, it is Saturday night, so there are little Archons. My little toddler Archons might be making noises, so just ignore. Hopefully it won't be like that BBC interview where they just run into the door and a walker and all that. But just in case, those are my little Archons, Evie, Sebi, and Eleanor. But I know Vance mentioned about my views, and I've certainly talked about them on the show. I would have to say, and of course, I am a work in progress. There is more downloading from the pleroma. I do feel that we do. I do feel that we live, as author Sam Chris said, and we live in a place of some really bad software. There's something definitely off with reality. I would say that we are in a prison because none of us are free, and it seems that's the ultimate thrust of our souls is to be free, and therefore we're not free if we're trying to be free. And I would say that I often pretty much lean that evil is self-sustaining. Again, I've given Vance my famous child porn argument that there cannot be any grace or good in child porn because that is an ultimate bone-crunching suffering that really serves no purpose except to extinguish innocence and to make people ignorant. I know I'm saying evil, but to me, evil is what keeps us ignorant, what keeps us trapped, what keeps us in the dark, and with the great metaphor, what keeps our divine spark smothered. So I guess that would be my take.
I'd like to add one thing here. For people that, I often read this in Gnostic writings or, modern stuff, and people say, why do you believe like in an evil spirit? Isn't just the demiurge just ignorant if he exists at all and so forth? I've often dubbed my version of this stuff shamanistic Gnosticism. Anybody who has studied the shamans will tell you that they believe in evil spirits. And as below, so above. I mean, if we have our Hitlers and Maos and Stalins, there's no reason to believe that the spirit world is, any more benevolent or enlightened or cool. And, everybody, once they die, suddenly their aeonic self-twin emerges or something like that. There are some bad dudes cosmically, and I think the Gnostic mythology tells us that truth.
I agree with that. I have a fundamental question, Scott. You've used the term reality a lot. In fact, that's pretty much this phase of the conversation subject. How are you defining reality? What do you have in mind when you're talking to us about reality?
Yeah, I should say the greater reality. First of all, at the most basic level, when I wrote this book 3 years ago through kind of a weird synchronicity, and I was bringing together 25 years of kind of my spiritual journey after my gnosis in 1989 that came out of a crisis, and, searching world religions in a panic like any Mormon who grew up most of his life, thinking he had the truth about reality. And, I had started out thinking, well, I'm going to write about, the evidence for God and, all that kind of stuff. And then I realized, something, if I want to sell any copies or have anybody interested in this, I can't tell people the real truth from the Gnostic point of view. I've got to get the Trojan horse inside the walls by starting out with what's wrong with philosophic materialism. And so I decided it just at the last minute to kind of change the chapter order, and my critique of the fake skeptics opens the book because I didn't want to spring the full Gnostic message, until I had people who would accept the idea of a God or a supernatural firmly on the path. So the first thing I would say about reality is, one could say to the philosophical materialist, well, you're right. I mean, there is no supernatural. Everything is natural. And that includes the 10-string or 11-string multiverse that a lot of the critics of religion are perfectly willing to embrace as a theory, even though there's no real hard evidence for it. But I would say I am not. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the many worlds theory. I think this is worse than a religious invention. I mean, the notion that every single possible scenario to infinity actually exists somewhere out there in a different dimension and stuff like that. I have kind of a more mundane approach, which is, let's say there's an 11-string multiverse as a starting point, and there are probably some what we would call paranormal dimensions that are the same, or maybe they're in other things that we don't begin to understand. I think it's kind of crazy for us to get up on a soapbox and start saying, okay, we've got it all locked down. We're close to getting the full truth here. I mean, it's only been a century since quantum theory started to unfold. I think 100 years from now, we might actually know more than we do right now. Let's be humble and let's be open to exploring things. And I wish the materialists would be open to the idea that there are other realities. Now, does that reality include the planet Kolob, where the Mormons say in another dimension, in a celestial dimension, is God's world? The Mormons have a very concrete idea about other realities. Mormons are monists, essentially, in that they say it's that spiritual dimensions are just more refined versions of the world that we know. And the Christians would agree that the gods live in a concrete world on planets and, other dimensions and stuff. Is that what we should believe? Is that possible? I don't know. I think that certainly there are entities that want us to believe some of these things. There are certainly a greater reality in terms of dimensions where these entities come from. I mean, for heaven's sake, UFOs can disappear instantly, and yet they have, as I show in my book, some concrete reality, or some of them do. So we're a long ways from figuring out what the greater reality is. With regard to where God is, or the true God, that is tough for even mystics to say. It would appear that the Gnostics are correct and traditional religion is wrong, that there is a great cosmic force. The godfathers of quantum physics believed in that kind of God, like Einstein did. So, a great intelligence behind the cosmic order. But, exactly how that relates to this world and this reality, we don't know. I advocate the shamanistic approach, which is this. Let's sing praise at the Gnostic churches in the hymns to the Holy Trinity and everything else. Doesn't hurt. Maybe it helps. When I pray to the high God and Jesus Christ, the liberator, and the holy dead. And I have a whole long list of former mentors and passed on family members and Gnostic saints and whatnot, because it doesn't hurt. It may be that the true God is more of a metaphor, or that down here in this reality, on occasion, the spirits appear to us, the miracles occur through kind of a shamanistic process, our guardian angel or eon. I don't know, but reality is complicated, and I would say most people, certainly the skeptics, don't seem to acknowledge that.
I can't help but speak up again here because it's so fascinating. Personally, I don't think that everything is an illusion. I think anything that consciousness can apprehend is real. But Scott, here's another question for you, because I know you're into ESP.
Mm-hmm.
We can have ESP with spirits, right? And
True.
So isn't it possible that all of us might be kind of networked into this in one conscious network? We're all nodes in a conscious network, and through ESP, we are one, even though we kind of shut our ports down and only have limited communications through certain fields. That could be
well, right. I mean, wouldn't that be kind of like Jung's collective unconscious? And the irony is that Freud absolutely believed in telepathy, because he had so many experiences with his patients. but he was an atheist. He didn't see a contradiction, but today's atheists say, oh my God, we'll have to excommunicate Freud. He believed in the supernatural, So there is no question that, well, I tested Uri Geller, the famous Israeli psychic. Before I interviewed him, I read the critical literature. James Randi wrote this so-called expose on Uri Geller, and he warned anybody who interviewed him, if he asks you to draw a picture, you got to go into another room and hide the tip of your pencil, or he'll figure out what you're drawing, and all that kind of stuff. And I tested him, and he was famous, for bending spoons or keys or whatever. And according to James Randi, oh, that's just a trick. He touches your key, and he has a little chemical on his finger. Well, my key was 50 feet away from him, and he bent it. So yeah, the powers of the mind are extraordinary. And in my book, in the chapter on ESP, which goes into the hundreds of double-blind experiments that have been done, especially in the Eastern Germany, Soviet Union, and other places where they're, oddly enough, for atheists, much more open-minded, or were back when they were doing these experiments. The powers of the mind are truly, truly extraordinary, to the point where people who are now experimenting in these areas, they got tired of just proving this stuff exists. They've moved on to applications. Dean Radin, who wrote the Conscious Universe, I think is now in Silicon Valley, trying to find applications so that, if one of our spaceships gets stuck out somewhere in the universe, we could maybe telepathically reach it when we're having trouble with earthly technology and stuff. So, yeah, you would think that this kind of thing would be funded, everybody would be into it. But for some reason or other, we're insisting that we're all individuals, have no contact whatsoever, and we're suffering in our little stunted minds. I'm just baffled by that kind, to the point where these skeptics about this kind of stuff will not look at a book on the subject. They will not read it. I mean, in God Reconsidered, the opening chapter, I talk about what happened to Dean Radin when his book came out and how hysterical the skeptics got. And they did a real smear review in Nature, the British magazine, and the editor would not allow letters in response to be published until he was fired, like a year later. And I mean, this is typical. They do not, they think that we are, spreading evil superstition, and the gatekeepers of scientific conventional wisdom, they're 20, 30 years behind current research, and they think this is evil propaganda, talking about, a networked mind and telepathy and all this kind of stuff.
See, now there's your
archon. Yeah, exactly. But Scott, I think what Vance is I think he's trying to get to is that if we are sort of, as he's saying, connected, different consciousness, or drawing from the well of the unconscious, then we are getting into monism, because after all, that means that in a way consciousness is an ever-going emanation flowing out, and of course fragmenting until we are ourselves, 7 billion or more in this universe. So isn't that an argument again for monism?
Well, I don't, again, it depends on, having to define this. According to the Mormons, the universe is monistic. It's just, but there are different dimensions and stuff like that. So we can say that we certainly know from the Gnostic myths, and most religious traditions would say our spirits are created by God. Gnostics would say that, that the divine does literally live within us. But there is, in traditional Gnosticism, a distinction between the true God and the individual spirits. And the individual spirits could do, here on earth, could do various kinds of spiritual work to try to get to the pleroma and to reunite with God. It's not like Shankara's Brahman idea where we are simply illusions. We are all connected. We're connected to God. Now, why we don't have a better connection is what we're kind of discussing. I don't think we are simply some facet of God's mind. I think that from what I recall about Gnostic mythology, the spirits, the bodies or the souls do have in them, mixed in with the worldly stuff, a spirit. Now, in my chapter on Is There Afterlife, I think it's pretty clear that when people die, they have a spirit that is some kind of physical entity. Allegedly, you can kind of weigh somebody when they die, and they can go into a different dimension. There's lots and lots and lots of evidence of that, of course, the skeptics deny. And apparently, you, at least from what we know, initially, you tend to be greeted by or to hang out with on the other side, either family or people of a similar kind. So it's not like we go into the other realm and then we become part of God again.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. The first part of our interview with Scott Smith, author of God Reconsidered. For the second part of this interview, please join our Arch of a Past shows at thegodabovegod.com. Remember, most shows will not be in their fullness or pleroma, except for members. Things continue to get juicy in our next part as Scott talks about free will, reincarnation, and more on the structure of the universe from a Gnostic perspective. And gets into a little Trump versus Hillary metaphysics with Vance. For more information on Scott, don't forget to visit godreconsidered.com. And as mentioned in our last episode with Robert Price, for April I will be giving away 2 complimentary tickets this month to the Myth Information Conference 4, held September 30th in Milwaukee. Brought to you by the amazing cats and my friends at Mythicist Milwaukee. As always, it will be an engaging, sterling event, and I'll be there. The tickets will be given as a drawing for, yes, members of the Arch of a Past shows and Patreon subscribers. So join and help us weaponize iconoclasts. For more information on the event, please visit mythicistmilwaukee.com/mythinformation-conference. Let us continue knowing ourselves and the secrets of the cosmos. It's a busy universe out there, and you have an amazing place there once you vanquish all inner and outer archons. And Scott's interview gets us a little closer. Write your own gospel, live your own myth, or Jehovah will get an infernal ghostwriter and lifetime actor to do that for you. Make you as bland as Dane Cook. Let us end with a little music from Sylvia Bliss, a very Gnostic-minded group.